Can you change the screen? Thanks. All right. The only thing between now and lunch is we're going to go through that written application in fairly amount of detail, and I'm going to talk about each of the items from the rubric so you understand what that rubric is saying. And Julie has a copy of the rubric for everyone that she'll be able to hand out that you'll be able to kind of take some notes on if you want. But before we do that, I was just curious, what did you guys think about that exercise? I think it was helpful for you to be able to say, oh, now I know how to work with a student. Any questions as you guys went along? You're like, I didn't quite understand that. Any clarity you need? Or was it all pretty self-explanatory? Okay. Did the step-by-step that I kind of talked to you guys through help think through it a little better?
And the big key is some of our students will have some, maybe have a few issues here and there with understanding what the terms mean, but I think as long as they have the adult with them,
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe we could go vocab out first.
Yeah.
You know, what is ideation, what is value.
Okay. Christine, I'm trying to remember, did our online course have a glossary? Does our online course have a glossary? Okay, so that's the online course, the course sites that I showed you guys does have a glossary of terms. Yeah. So that's... Yep, I think that would be very helpful. Yep, definitely. Anything else you guys want to share about that before we go to the next section? Cool. I'm glad it was useful. I think it's exactly what you want to do with your students. It's a great way to flush out some ideas before you really go full bore into it. But it's a nice strategic way of thinking before you start asking those questions of people. So the written application is built into, it's graded in 5 main areas, and this kind of helps you structure this written application because there's no template for this, but there are elements that you need to capture. So the way that it looks out is summary, product service details, marketing and customers, operations, and financials. This must be submitted as a PDF, but there's no set structure. So creativity is obviously encouraged, but make sure that the student finds it functional and useful for them, because that's what it's for. It's for them to execute to a business. It's kind of part of the summary. I'll go through it here. So the summary has a short description of the company and product or service. So to the abstract perspective, Dan, question, I think that's where it gets captured. You're going to talk generally who the target market / ideal customer are, the vision / mission statement for the company, and of course, we want to make sure that the spelling, grammar, and punctuation are all correct. They are graded on that, just as you would grade them in any sort of paper that they would write for you. The mission and vision statement is a really interesting one. There's a great video, which I don't even know if it's on our site or not, but there's a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek, who is a marketing expert in the field, who talks about the why you're doing your business, and that's what matters to customers. So there's a circle that's centered around why, and then how, and then what. And most companies and entrepreneurs will start with the what they're doing. They'll talk about the features, benefits, but that doesn't really matter to a customer as much as the why you're doing it. If you focus on the why, you're focusing on the problem. You're focusing on why this customer has a problem every day and why you as a company are created something to solve that for them. So if that mission and vision statement focuses around that why, it's really important to think about. Check out that video. It's well worth the 15 minutes by Simon Sinek. It's S-I-N-E-K. S-I-N-E-K, I believe is how you spell it. I could be very wrong. Is that right? He's brilliant man. So worth a watch. All right, section 2, product service detail. Detailed description of the product or service. So this is more of the how and the what of your product. What are the features? What's it really doing? How does it work? Second, there's a plan for distributing the product or service. So the channels section of your business model canvas talks about distribution. How do you reach your customers? Are you doing it through e-commerce? Are you going to sell it on Home Shopping Network? Are you going to put it in Target? Are you going to sell it door to door like the Kirby vacuum cleaners? I was a sucker and let some guy in my house one time. My wife still gives me crap for it today. It was fantastic, though. It was amazing. The guy was so mad when I didn't buy it. They do make a good vacuum cleaner. It is good. It actually prompted me to go buy a vacuum cleaner that day, but I didn't buy his. No, you don't. Third, there's a plan for ensuring quality assurance for the product or service. I believe this fits interestingly into the customer service aspect of your business model canvas. Not something, honestly, I even spend a lot of time talking about with my entrepreneurs, but I think where it fits is just saying we're ensuring that there's no bugs in our software, that we're able to support a product if anything goes wrong, make sure that it gets out the door in a good place. Fourth, there's a plan for manufacturing, developing the product or service. So how do you make it? So not only how does it work, but how do you actually get this thing made? So if you don't have the skills right now, who's going to build it for you? Why are they building it for you? Are they the right person to build it for you? And then the last piece on the product service, I believe, is there's a description of a prototype or plans for making one. So I think this fits well into that first bullet point as well. So if you cover kind of the detailed description of the product or service and your description of a prototype or the product or service, it's kind of the same thing. The difference here might be that if the student actually builds something, they build a website, they build a prototype that's a tangible thing, they 3D print it, they could actually then have a picture of it. Better description than just saying it's vaporware. It doesn't exist in actuality. But some students, I think, if they can actually have something that's physically built, will put them a step ahead. Not required. As you see, plans for making one is important as well. That's the first two sections of that written application. Third, marketing and customers. There is clearly a niche market, and desired customers are described in detail. Now, the niche market is interesting. It's just saying that, I think that's just saying we have a specific market we're going after, a certain set of people that we know we're targeting. Anybody that says they're going to sell this to everyone, barking up the wrong tree when they're starting out. It might end up being for everybody, but you got to start somewhere. And if you don't tell them to focus their energies, it becomes impossible to market and sell something. Because then you're going after too many channels and too many opportunities. So let them focus on the one that they believe is the right one to go after and focus on it in that application. There are profiles of the average and ideal customers. So again, getting more granular, more specific into what that person does, eats, sleeps, breathes, who they are. Don't tell me teachers. Tell me what type of teachers. Are they history teachers? Are they gym teachers? Are they art teachers? Are they females? Are they males? Are they 22 to 30? Are they 30 to 40? Are they 40 and higher? Always good questions to get them. Be as specific as you can. It's going to help you drive your business. There's a description of barriers to entry and a plan to overcome them. This fits nicely with the competition. If you're thinking about the market in general, you have competitors in that market space. You also have barriers to entry that can exist. So one thing that you have to look at when a competitor is in place is, do they have intellectual property in place that keeps you from getting into that market? Is that a potential barrier to entry? If it is, you got to watch out and figure your way around it. There's also the reality of you have to, as a company, create barriers to entry. What is your competitive advantage? What makes you better than the rest? So between these two bullet points, you're really talking about your strategic analysis of your competition and saying, how do we beat them? Who are they? What makes them work? What makes them not as good as us? And what are we going to do to create our own barriers to entry? The reality is there really aren't any barriers. But you kind of have to build up something strategically to move forward faster, better, something that allows you to move better and gain market share faster than they can. And then the last thing, which I think fits into those two previous ones nicely, is something called a SWOT analysis. If you don't know what a SWOT analysis is, it's just 4 quadrants. You have strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's your opportunity as a company to look at that and say, where do we position ourselves? How are we really as good as we say we are? What do we need to get there? And how do we, again, address our competition? It's a good.
So to consider them internally, internal factors.
It's a really good point. So, as he pointed out for the video, the strengths and weaknesses are internal. Things you want to look at, opportunities and threats are external to your business. Good point. I would leave it up to the student, to be honest, and how they best represent it. I think from a working perspective, you can do it on one sheet and have them write it out. But when they want to present it, they can do it however they want. Because how it gets into the pitch, they do have on the rubric for the pitch a SWOT analysis. I do not recommend you do one slide of a SWOT analysis in the pitch. I would say build those into the other elements. And I've actually given you guys a nice little cheat sheet of how I believe the elements of the rubric fit into the 10 different slides of the pitch. We have a little upper hand here because we haven't shared that with the rest of the network or the rest of the state yet. Might have to keep it between us, our little competitive advantage. The other aspects of the marketing customers, there are reasonable marketing strategies to promote company brand and service. I say this because saying that you're doing social media marketing is not a marketing strategy. Be specific. Tell them to be specific around the strategies they're using. I have a lot of entrepreneurs that say, oh, we're going to put stuff on Twitter and Facebook. Well, that's not a strategy. Those are tactics that you use. But even then, it's so high level that it's not really helping explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. So the intention there is make sure that that's a reasonable marketing strategy that fits well with their demographic. If you're going to say we're going to use Snapchat to sell to people in nursing homes, probably not the best and reasonable marketing strategy. Nobody in that age group uses Snapchat. There's a detailed description of advertising mediums used for reaching customers. So if your strategies and how you're going to reach your customers, the tactics that you're going to utilize are your advertising mediums to get there. So you have certain goals and strategies in your marketing, and you're going to use certain tactics to get there, and that's your advertising medium. So explaining why you're using Google AdWords, why you're using Facebook, how you're using it, and what you're trying to do to reach them is what that gets into. There's a creative tagline for both the company and product and service. There's also a creative logo for both the company and product and service. So we are asking people to get creative. We want a visual brand mark, and we want a tagline to go with it. To briefly explain what they do. The fourth section is operations. There's description and rationale for the legal structure of the company. I did not cover that today. It is in our online course, right, Christine? My opinion has changed over the years as to why you would incorporate as a C Corp versus an LLC. Companies that are not seeking follow-on funding or outside investors at a grand scale who are not going after those should be an LLC. Yes. Okay. Okay. So this was brought in from Junior Achievement, as Christine has clarified. Will likely be somewhat edited for next year, but that's why these exist. Again, LLC, in my opinion, is if a company is not seeking follow-on funding from VC, venture capital, LLC. If you are seeking follow-on funding from venture capital, you want to be a C Corp. That's the easy way around it. There's a description and rationale of the core company team and their roles. Everything about an early stage business is about the team. Make sure that the team understands what roles they play. Don't just say they're founder number one, founder number two. Have some understanding of their skill sets and say who should be the CEO, who should be the CMO, marketing officer, CTO, because they're a technical person. As I've pointed out before, startups, early stage businesses, these titles mean nothing because you have to wear multiple hats. But the important thing is looking at it and saying you have the right team to achieve success. And explain, if you have gaps, how are you filling those gaps? You have key partners. Yes. So good point. So you said the exercise that he uses, he says 10 years down the road, he'll look at what the people I need to support that business at that time, and my name might be in 17 different roles at that time, but you're going to say, these are the people we need to support that business. Is that correct? There's a description and rationale for where the company will be headquartered. Don't really know why we have this, but again, I think it's carried over. End of the day, it doesn't actually matter that much, but if you have a rationale as to saying we're supporting a certain type of demographic, a certain group of people, a certain type of enterprise, and they're centered in this area, then maybe it makes sense to be headquartered there. So your point, tax consequences make a difference. You're right. So Delaware C Corp might make sense because of their friendly tax structure that they have there. Okay. All right. Tax structures. Something to think about. Okay. There's an acknowledgement of how the company may have social impact. Pretty self-explanatory. Into the pitch, figuring out how it fits, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Yep. I think that goes back to that vision and mission of the why. Yep, makes sense. And then the final piece is the written application financials. There are detailed financial documents outlining critical financial components, revenue costs. Detailed in the sense that you're going to want to understand your expenses and your costs. Month-to-month breakdown's nice because it helps you have a little more granular view in what you're doing. Helps you understand also how much money you need to make this work. So if you are seeking initial funding and investment, that it's working out. I also use these detailed financial documents to really understand, does this even make business sense? If I'm charging a certain price, can I actually make money? Can I even pay myself a salary if I'm charging $25 a pop when I actually need to charge $75? That's something to consider when you're looking at detailed financials. There's a clear and reasonable break-even point. I always put this, it's roughly 18 months. It's kind of my rule of thumb with tech startups. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to you can't break even after 5 years if you don't have reasonable income. Break-even point means you're making as much money as you're spending. You're not losing money. If you keep losing money, you're not going to stay in business. There's an understanding of the cost of compliance, so fees, license, taxes. Often, even in people that are starting their business, not just high schoolers, it's anybody who's starting a business often overlooks these things. They don't think about the implications of what it costs to do business. So make sure that they understand the regional, if they're going to set up a business here in the state of Kentucky, what are the licenses they require in that county to run that type of business? What are the costs associated with setting up a business? What does this tax structure look like? So to your point, if you set up in a different state, you might actually have benefit from that. And you might have rationale to say, I'm going to set up in Delaware because their tax structure might be beneficial to a C Corp, more beneficial to a C Corp than Kentucky. And then the last piece, I believe, is the business appears to be financially sustainable. So the unit economics work. Don't lose money. Have profit. That's pretty much it. Any questions? So that's the written application. I wanted to make sure I got through detail on that so that the rubric was clearly understood by you guys so you can convey that back to the students as well. Some of them, personally, maybe not agree with, but that's okay. That's the way it is right now, and we're going to work on this, and we are iterating every year to make it better. Sure, go ahead.
So, the academies, but, you know, the JV, all of our teachers, so essentially what I did was like a scorecard and made all of the questions are incorporated here, and it tells them
Great. Any other final questions when you guys get lunch? All right, cool. Lunch is served over there. It looks like they got a nice spread of sandwiches and salad, and enjoy. And then once you guys get lunch, we're gonna. I'm just gonna quickly. We're gonna come back here, and you're probably just gonna eat at your desks, and we'll do a working lunch, and I'll walk through the pitch.